Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this plenary session called, rather portentously, Sustaining a Shrinking Planet. I have on the platform with me this morning a tremendous group of speakers to inform and entertain us on a key question facing us, which is that as population and prosperity grow globally, go across the world, natural resources such as water and land are under mounting pressure, threatening food production, economic growth. So we need to ask ourselves, how can we manage a scarce resource, which water and land turn out to be, to ensure food security, economic growth, and environmental sustainability? 20 years ago, I made a series of films for the BBC called Water Wars, 4 long, hour-long films. We went all over the world. People thought we were crazy because no one was interested in the idea that water might be a scarcity. We were just a few years ahead of our time. On my immediate left, I have the President of Iceland, Ólafur Ragnar Grímsson. Next to the President, Peter Brabeck, who many of you know, Chairman of the Board of Nestlé and a member of the Foundation Board of the Forum. Next to Peter, Bram Klaeijsen from Cargill in Singapore. Next to Bram, Tom Searle, Group CEO and President CH2M Hill. Then the distinguished Chief Minister of Karnataka, B.S. Yeddyurappa. And then one of our hosts. And so an absolute delight to welcome you to our stage, Ren Fung, the Vice Mayor of Tianjin, and it's a great pleasure to have you with us and an opportunity to thank you for the tremendous hospitality of the city to us as we all come back here. Mr. President, kick us off. Tell us why we should be concerned about the threat to natural resources like land and water. Paint a picture for us, inspire us, fly at 35,000 feet.
Well, first of all, I think it is very important to realize that we normally have a very narrow view of water. We tend to be speaking primarily about running water from lakes or rivers, drinking water, as you just demonstrated now. Thank you very much.
That was a visual aid.
But if we look at the globe, water exists in many different forms. And it is the interrelationship of fresh water, the ocean water, the hot water which comes from underground and can be used to produce clean energy in most parts of the world. But above all, frozen water, which we normally call ice or glaciers, which of course is no big news to my country. But the world has only recently woken up to the fact that this is all interrelated. That if the frozen water starts melting in the glaciers and in the Greenland ice sheet or in the Himalayas, it will have a tremendous impact on the freshwater, on the rivers, on the lakes. And probably the gravest threat to India and China in the coming decades is the impact of the melting glaciers in the Himalayas or other areas of China and India, or the melting of the ice in Greenland, which would sink big landmass in many parts of the world, including reservoirs of fresh water.
Right.
So therefore, in the global planning for the 21st century, I think it's of fundamental importance that we move the parameters from talking about, which in a way is the title of our discussion here today, land and water, assuming it's agricultural land and drinking water and so on and so forth, to talk about water in its comprehensive way on Earth. And there, of course, the depletion of the ocean resources and that impact is as big as the reduced capacity of land to produce agricultural products. So my first point in this debate is that we really need to move the parameters of our concerns on and our plannings and the global agreements, because we have not yet in a comprehensive way as mankind done this. We have a law of the sea,
Right.
but we don't have any comprehensive international agreement dealing with water in all its forms.
Thank you very much. Peter, let me go to you. You've been an absolute leader in the corporate world and beyond the corporate world in the last few years in trying to get us to think critically and seriously about these issues. What's on your mind now? What are the key challenges for you?
Yeah, I would like to perhaps focus down again from the comprehensive view to the perhaps more urgent problem of today. And I think to understand that, we have to understand that water has basically three dimensions. I'm talking now about the freshwater area. It has a dimension as a social good. That's what we call basically a human right. Those are the 5 liters of water that we need for hydration, the 25 liters for minimum hygiene. That's what I would call social good, human right. The second one is an environmental.
Right.
We need about 4,200 cubic kilometers of water in theory in order to assure that the fauna and the flora of this world can live. Unfortunately, this is the part which has given today most. That's where most of the destruction is taking place. And then we have the other dimension, which is the commercial dimension of the water, which is the water that we need for washing the clothes, for gardening, for swimming pools, for industry, for all the other things that we have. This area, which is the biggest one, has one big problem, that in most cases, water doesn't have a value, and therefore we are misusing water. Today, the situation is very clear. Over the last couple of years, we have been overusing fresh water on what is sustainable, what can be replenished afterwards. Today, this overusage is 300 cubic kilometer, and we made a look into the future. It's going to have an impact, substantial impact. We have a water gap of about 30 to 40% fresh water if we do not change water policy as it is today. Right. Which part of it is going to affect mostly? The most part will be affected is agriculture, because we forget that we drink 5 liters of water, but we are eating, depending whether we have a vegetarian diet or we have a meat diet, somewhere between 2,500 liters of water to 6,500 liters of water, each individual every single day. By the way, as we are growing the amount of population, and as we are changing the eating patterns from a more vegetarian one to a more mixed one, right, we have a huge multiplier in demands for food products in the way we are living today. So for the next forthcoming one, just in order to be able to produce sufficient food is going to be a major challenge, a water challenge. Now add to that another political dimension, which our politicians, I think, have not reflected enough, which is the introduction of biofuels. I mean, what you're doing with biofuels, basically, you produce calories in the agricultural sector for the fuel market, for the energy market. Now, the energy market is 20 times as big as the food market in caloric terms. Mm-hmm. So when our politicians tell us that we should replace 20% of our fuel market with biofuels, they just cannot make mathematics, because 20% of a 20 times bigger market would mean that today we would have to triple food production immediately. You need 9,100 liter water to produce 1 liter of biodiesel, and we are already today overusing the water. I mean, this cannot work out by no way. Right. So the fundamentals, political fundamentals, the way we're running and managing water today are absolutely wrong.
Very good. We'll come back to how we can manage it better, I hope. Bram, Cargill, of course, is one of the world's leading agriculture and farming companies. food security has really become a key political issue in the last few years, sort of came out of nowhere in 2007, 2008. How can we manage arable land and so as to address a growing global concern about food security?
Yeah, I indeed gonna bring it a bit closer to heart, very close. And I'm gonna talk a bit about, with the increased population, how can we still use with our existing resources, using them wisely in order to be sustainable from a perspective of agriculture and food production and food use. Well, first, so I have 4 points that I want to highlight. The first one is the efficient use of land. We cannot produce every crop efficiently everywhere in the world. If a country tries to do that, it means that we have inefficient use of land. I mean, it's obvious that corn you can grow very efficiently in the US or in Argentina or in China. But wheat, for example, you cannot grow everywhere very competitively. It's maybe Australia, it's maybe the US, it's maybe Europe. Soybeans, similar, you can make a story. If we try to grow every crop in every country where we need that product, that is just absolutely misuse of the resources that we have available. So we should not do that. Water management in general. If we can use normal land and normal rainwaters for growing those crops, we should do that. If we need elsewhere, irrigation by groundwater is complete misuse of the resource water in those areas. So we should then get those crops from areas where we produce them very efficiently to areas where we need them. Palm oil, very good example about sustainability. Palm oil is the biggest oil, by the way, today, used in food products. It's also used a bit in biofuels, as Mr. Brabeck just said. Palm oil is by far the most efficient oil to produce. It uses about 7 to 8 times less land than rapeseed oil or soya oil. Soya oil actually is worse than rapeseed oil. So 7 to 8 times less land used in palm oil compared to the other soft oils. So to find the only solution for the 4 to 5 million tons of increase in oil per year in the globe will be palm oil. We cannot just grow more soybeans or more rapeseed in order to produce that oil. Therefore, it's very important to be aligned on the sustainability of palm oil. That means that the GMO, the NGOs, the food, branded food companies, the agricultural companies, and also the governments of the plantation owners, so to speak, Indonesia, Malaysia in particular, and some other countries, we have to be aligned in policies that determines what is sustainability. Set the rules for the game, set how to reinforce them, and how to implement them in a proper way. We do that via the RSPO, and we need to do that more efficiently in order to really create sustainability there. One other point, I'm almost done, Mr. Chairman, is technology. Technology, and then especially around genetically modification. It is in many countries taboo. We don't want to use them. Consumers don't want to use them. But the use of technology, and GMO in particular, will really help in growing crops more efficiently, have less diseases, use less pesticides, less water, and make crops less vulnerable for droughts and this kind of stuff. So what can we do to convince the consumers that GMO is not a bad thing? How can we help the world in making this something better? And then one of the last items, free trade. All of this only can work if we have free trade. If we bring products from areas of surplus to areas of deficit in a proper way. Therefore, export bans are not very helpful. Therefore, the subsidies we do on certain crops to produce bioethanol or biodiesel are not very helpful. They upset and they change basically the system as it is. And it creates a problem for the farmers, creates a problem for the traders, and it just increases the price of the food. So, summarize, I would say, the public sector and the governments, the private sector and the public sector, governments and everybody, we need to work together to be aligned and to address the issues. And if we do that, I think there is a way out.
There are about 3 points that I hope we'll come back to. You very, I'll mention one now, just to kind of get you prepared. you very, very briefly mentioned the role of NGOs in your world, and I think we need to focus a little later on the extent to which the issues that you're addressing and the issues that you have put before us so clearly are ones that are widely understood or not widely understood in the civil society arena. So perhaps we can come back to that. Tom, your company is a leading engineering and infrastructure company, consulting and other stuff. And I know you have a particular passion about how these issues present themselves in the context of extraordinary urbanization. So talk to us a little about that.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to just focus on three things. First, kind of discuss some of the trends that are relevant to this debate, and then talk about the challenges that result from these trends, and then to conclude with a number of solutions that I think might work for some of the challenges that we face. First and foremost, populations are increasing, and primarily so in Asia. The Asia-Pacific region really has 4 billion of our colleagues that live here. And when you look at Asia in particular, in mega cities, the Asia-Pacific region really has 7 of the 10 major mega cities in the world. China, for example, its population is continuing to grow at the pace of 12 to 13 million per year. That's a mega city per year. But there's another phenomenon occurring, and that is urbanization. And looking at the statistics of China, by 2015, 50% of the population of China will be urbanized. And that's the case in India and Indonesia and elsewhere. These urban centers are also industrializing themselves. So we have an issue with populations increasing, populations urbanizing, and urbanized centers industrializing. This puts a tremendous strain on the existing infrastructure of our megacities. And in doing so, it causes a lot of challenges. For example, there's tremendous aged infrastructure in existing megacities that will need to be upgraded in addition to expanded. There's also limited water supplies, and that fact is even further compounded by the fact that we pollute whatever existing water supplies we have. And let's don't dismiss climate change, because it's for real and it's happening, and we deal with it all the time, all over the place. Another important phenomena here is that in general, 80% of all water is used in agriculture and 20% is industrial and domestic. Well, because of the needs of increasing populations and increasing industrialization, there's a shift from agriculture to industrial and domestic. This will cause, in my opinion, some concerns in terms of food supply, inflation, and other issues. But it's not all doom and gloom, let me tell you, because these are problems that we face all the time. So let me just offer some solutions. And I want to start off by making this statement. I believe, and many of my colleagues, that we do not have a water crisis. What we have is a water management crisis. If we can manage this issue, we will be better off. Let me throw out some suggestions. First of all, there needs to be more focus on pollution. It's obviously less costly to treat an unpolluted source. And oftentimes we focus on the supply as opposed to the pollution aspects. Asset management is a key ingredient to success. We need to fix the things that are important, and we need to maintain the things that we fix. For example, we were just discussing in many of these major metropolitan areas, and I'll use Delhi as an example, 60% leakage occurs in the system. So therefore, if the Delhi population increases and you need a 100 million gallon new water treatment plant, you're essentially building a 160 million gallon treatment plant. So if you were to proportion that, that's a 60% increase that really accomplishes very little. integrated water management. You hear this term time and time again, and it's very unfortunate for us because we act as consultants. But sometimes we deal with the industrial side, sometimes we deal with the domestic side, sometimes we deal with the stormwater runoff. We need to look at these systems in an integrated fashion. It's water, wastewater, stormwater, point source, non-point. You can ruin an entire supply from an agricultural perspective in a basin, so these issues need to be viewed from an integrated management perspective. Last but not least, public awareness and education is significant, reinforced with enforceable regulation. But I will tell you, in the United States where I'm from, the EPA was formed because of outrage. And the water laws, both in Europe and in the United States and a lot of the developed countries, are not driven anymore by regulation, but they're driven by people wanting better water and better quality of life. So those are some solutions that we find that work around the world in many of the issues and challenges that we deal with.
Tom, you mentioned that a city like Delhi might lose in its water system 60%. We were talking in the green room earlier. Peter made the point that in older European cities like London, you might lose 30%. Are there success stories out there that can be emulated of city water systems that have sorted this out?
Absolutely, and there's kind of a jewel in Asia here, and that happens to be Singapore. We do a lot of work in Singapore, and their water losses are less than 5%. And that's a very effective thing, because as Singapore expands its supply, it only has to expand its supply 1 times 0.05 as opposed to 1 times 0.6. But that's an example.
So these are things that you can fix?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But as I said, once you fix it, it needs to be maintained and repaired, because it's a vital infrastructure component that can be very successful in terms of what it does if it's maintained, fixed, and operated well.
Chief Minister, over to you. Talk to us about the policy framework and the regulatory framework that India is putting in place, and that a major state like Karnataka is putting in place to ensure better management of land and water.
I bring to all of you warm greetings from India, the land of Lord Buddha and Mahatma Gandhi. Reference to these two great souls has much relevance to today's session on sustaining a shrinking planet. Lord Buddha has said, greed is the root cause of all sufferings. Mahatma Gandhi has said, this planet can meet all our needs, but not our greed. If you understand and follow the spirit of teachings of Lord Buddha and Mahatma Gandhi, this planet will not only sustain for many more centuries without shrinking, but will be a better place for the future generation to live and let live. We have been drawing inspiration from our ancient civilization and culture. We believe in the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, meaning the planet Earth is one family. Our philosophy preaches Sarve Jano Sukhino Bhavantu, meaning let everybody be happy. I am sure you will agree with me that these words of wisdom should be the guiding principles of humanity for realizing the goal of sustainable development. Any industrial or economic development will certainly bring about change in the nature's equilibrium, but development is inevitable. We need to strike a balance between development and the impact on environment. Now, let me talk about what my Karnataka state in India is doing in this direction. Fortunately, Karnataka is blessed with abundant natural sources along with talented human resource. We have documented our mission and sustainable strategies in Karnataka Vision 2020. Karnataka is a pioneer in bringing many policies and taking several initiatives and implementing action plans. Some of them are promotion of green energy through a special renewable energy policy, promotion of organic farming, increasing green cover, protecting ecological sensitive mountain ranges and animal sanctuaries, scientific management of solid waste and recycling, efficient use of surface and groundwater and rainwater harvesting both in rural and urban areas, blending of biofuel with diesel in the public transport buses, thrust on mass transport system. Friends, I would like to thank the World Economic Forum for having given me this opportunity to learn from interaction with the new champions and to share my thoughts with the learned audience. Sir, let this annual meeting of the World Economic Forum keep reminding us constantly about our duty towards the positively and welfare of the next several generations when we plan our development project. It would be useful to have similar sessions at national level. Also need to design and implement sustainable development projects. VEF role in this regard is critical. I wish the session a grand success.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Deputy Mayor Ren,
Yes.
we heard from Premier Wen yesterday, some of these numbers, of course, just kind of stagger the rest of us, that the Tianjin area's economic growth this year is expected to be 16.6%. The city is now a city of 13 million. How on earth are you coping with that scale of economic growth so as to manage your natural resources and meet the needs of a population that isn't just growing in size, but more importantly, perhaps, is growing in terms of the expectations of the quality of life that it deserves?
So in order to express my idea, I would like to in Chinese.
Sure.
Okay. 所以确实我同意这个刚才Searle先生讲的。
I actually very much agree with Mr. Searle, and I think that the water crisis and water management crisis coexist. And for the government, we need to manage water resources and to make good use of the water resources. And Tianjin has a very rapid economic development. And last year, the GDP growth rate was 16.5%, and from January to August, it increased by 13.8%, while Tianjin is a city with water shortage.
我在这些方面，我们主要是在政府加大管理。
And while we are strengthening the government management of the water resources, and we have adopted 3 measures to increase our water management. Firstly, we increased input on water treatment, especially the sewage water treatment. And in this year, we are going to invest in building up 67 sewage water treatment plants, and we target at 95% of the sewage water being treated properly. And this is also a target set by Premier Wen when he visited Tianjin. And secondly, we also need to introduce technologies, for example, the desalinization technologies. If you visited the Binhai area, you may find a lot of plants which have adopted this technology.
We have introduced technology from Singapore to desalinize seawater. By 2015, we will be able to achieve 1/3 of seawater desalination. And then we also have the water diversion projects, diverting water from the Yellow River and Luanhe River to Tianjin, so that the water shortage in Tianjin can be to some extent alleviated. We also use legislative measures to control this water gobbling industry's development. For the industry policies, we want to develop high quality and high tech industries development to avoid those industries and businesses that use a lot of water. In the meantime, we have also done a lot of publicity and education and campaigns, particularly for the school pupils and middle school students. We actually have textbooks which are specific in the area of water saving and conservation. Thank you.
If anyone is here from the government of Singapore, incidentally, I would say you're having an extremely good session, seeing as compliments keep being paid to the city-state's economic management and resource management. I was very interested in the mayor's comments, particularly when he was talking about the diversion of the Yellow River or diversion of Yellow River resources to sustain some of the demand in Tianjin. And I'm just going to throw this out, and anyone can pick it up. Bram, you were talking about the importance of free trade, particularly in agricultural commodities, to make sure that the benefits are spread around, and that if a crop is particularly suited to be grown in a particular place, then everyone benefits if it's grown there and then traded around the world. Do any of you think there's a role for trading water, incidentally? If you go back to the 19th century, there was a very significant water trade in frozen water from the Basque Country to Italy and from Massachusetts to the American South. President of Iceland, you've got a lot of frozen water. You could sell it loads of places.
Yes, we have a considerable amount of frozen water of the glaciers, the largest in Europe, but we are also the largest reservoir of fresh water left in Europe. And as an indication of the changing world and water trade, we are now discussing with Saudi Arabia to receive tankers regularly from Saudi Arabia.
Fantastic.
And they are a previous generation of tankers, which have already served the oil business, and so the investment has been paid. But they can be refitted with rubber balloons and so on inside. And they will come to the Icelandic harbors, and the balloons will be filled with water that will then be transported to Saudi Arabia. And I think that is, although it's very good for us as a business, to sell the water which otherwise would just flow into the ocean to Saudi Arabia. I think it's a warning to all of us. It's a warning to all of us that there is already on a very active race for access to the water reservoirs, just not decades from where we are now, but already. So when my country and the local municipalities have to refit the harbor in order to be able to serve the Saudi Arabia water tankers, we are indeed in a new world. And what you asked about, trade in water, is already with us.
Excellent. This being a World Economic Forum session, already I can tell you that 40 email messages have gone out from our audience in which they've wanted to know investment opportunities in trading in water. But I thought that was fabulous. Very, very interesting. Peter and Bram, I'd like you to, and Tom, perhaps you can come on this too. These are areas of intense, passionate public concern. Some of the things that we've touched on this morning. Clean and safe water supplies, a sense that families deserve to know that the water that they're drinking is safe for their children. Bram, you mentioned GM crops as an issue. Peter, you've been talking about just the kind of shortage of clean and safe water for people. At the same time, many of the solutions that you've suggested, though they sound rational and sensible, for one reason or another, are politically contentious. I mean, for example, some of the trade issues that you touched on, Bram. So my question, I guess, is this. Is civil society and NGOs and the pressure group world on your side in thinking through solutions to these issues? Or do you find that you constantly butt heads with them? Bram, do you want to go first?
Thanks for the honor.
Yeah, well, you're the farmer.
Okay. Well, first let's start us on NGOs. I mean, I think NGOs did very well, and they really have done a good job in the past to bringing points to the attention of the people, the public, and also keeping large companies on their toes. So I think it really served the purpose extremely well. Nothing against that.
I think there's a but sentence coming.
Well, I'm Dutch, so, and I'm an engineer, so kind of, yeah. But I think, I mean, we heard yesterday this building has been built in 9 months. And I can tell you that there are standards for this building, how it should be built, how strong it should be, how the foundation should be, to build this enormous building in Tianjin. Why can't we find ways and means to do the same with the things we talked about, like food? Is it so difficult to agree what real sustainability is of palm oil? Is it so difficult to agree what is more important? Food, fuel. Is it so difficult to accept free trade flow because there is areas of surplus and there is areas of deficit? Right. I don't think so. Right. So, and again, I'm an engineer, I'm not a politician, but I think this is the problem. I don't think that yet everybody is aligned, try to find solutions, rather than protecting its own turf. And I think the time has now come that we can no longer do that. So we have to, together, and that is all the stakeholders, so that is the NGOs included, right, and the companies, and the governments, we all have to work together to find solutions before it is too late.
Peter, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I mean, when you think rationally, then of course you're right. Problem is that we are not living in a rational world. We are living in an emotional world and in a political environment that just does not produce a framework which would allow rational thinking to prevail. I mean, otherwise we would have the door around signed for many years. Right. We wouldn't go on with this discussion, which at the end of the day comes back to the very simple issue of water and agriculture. Yeah. That's why the door around is being blocked. Absolutely. Okay, so now, having said this, I would like to find a way out perhaps from a different angle. I think governments in general, and with due respect, again, when I listen to the explanation of how a city like Tianjin can try to solve this problem, normally are inclined to talk about the supply side. Mm-hmm. How can we supply the necessary water? Mm-hmm. There's only one hiccup to this. There is no necessary water available anymore.
There's a supply side constraint.
There's a supply side constraint.
Right.
Okay? Now, I heard then, yes, but then we have the possibility of desalination. Right. 1/3, I just took note, sure. 1/3. Well, let me just show you a little bit the relationship between energy and water. You need 2 to 3 liters of oil to produce 1,000 right. liters of desalinated water. You need 9,100 liters of water to produce 1 liter of biodiesel. You see, the two things doesn't work. It is just from a mathematical point of view, it does not work in the long term. I give another example where energy doesn't work. Take California. We just had Schwarzenegger around here, right. A good Austrian friend. In California, we have a problem of water. So pumping the water from the underground and moving it over the mountains in order to be able to irrigate, to produce the crops, which then afterwards should produce partially again oil, California is using more than 20% of total energy production just to move the water around. So it shows you again that those are not the solutions. They are the solutions which normally governments, because it is big projects, they like to prefer. But if we want to find a solution for the water overuse, we have to go to the demand side.
Right.
That's the important part.
Right. And
we have worked out, we have created the 2030 Water Resource Group right. together with the World Economic Forum, and we have made the demand curves for 154 water basins. Yeah. And we have elaborated and costed out every one of those solutions that there are. And we are starting to work with governments. As a matter of fact, I just had a very important meeting with the Chief Minister of Karnataka, where we're going to work with that. But we are working now with 14 governments on the demand side. I think that's where we have to find the solution.
That story of California, of course, gives me an idea for a film. I'll drop Roman Polanski a note to see how many people from the audience get the reference. Tom, very quickly, and then the President, then I'm going to go to questions.
You know, we talk about this water, energy, food, sustainability nexus. And let me give you an example of where this can work. And I'm talking the Middle East. There's no more contentious place than the Middle East. Right. But they have water shortages. They are growing crops out there that require water. And they have political issues. But there's a project out there called Red to Dead.
Right, right.
Okay? You have the Dead Sea here, and you have the Red Sea here. And the Dead Sea needs salination, and reverse osmosis' biggest problem, or desalination, is the salt content. And reverse osmosis also has an energy issue, but the head between the Dead and Red Sea fuels the membrane plant. The brine goes to the Dead Sea that's being depleted, and guess what? The Palestinians, the Jordanians, and the Israelis have more water than they had yesterday.
And they need it. Yeah.
This is an example of the things that can work, and I try to focus on things that can work, and there's solutions that are all over. You just need to look for them in an integrated fashion, but that's an example.
President Grimson, you wanted to come in quickly?
Well, I think what this discussion has brought out is that if we continue to seek solutions locally or even nationally, we are not going to succeed. Because we have to acknowledge that this has become so interdependent globally, how we use water, the supply, and so on and so forth, that we really need to establish an internationally recognized and accepted regime which describes what you do at the local level, the national level, and the international level. Otherwise, you could get wars over water, as you mentioned in the beginning. You could have a very effective race with countries trading in water, as I indicated before. And I believe this is possible. I believe this is possible. 100 years ago, travel was primarily localized. Now we all agree that in order for us to travel to this great city, we need a highly regulated, disciplined international air traffic system that we all subject ourselves to. Our countries participated in it at the local level and at the national level. And I believe it's now urgent to try to create such an international regime for water. And I believe politically it is relatively easy, because you don't have to explain to an ordinary citizen anywhere in the world why water is important. Everybody knows that. So therefore, the task is here and now to create the political climate and the method and the will to take the next 2 or 3 years to create an international regime. Because if we wait 10, 20, or 30 years, we're going to lose this battle.
Let's go to questions. The first questioner, who I have right in the front, is Arjun Tapan, Senior Special Advisor to the Asia Development Bank, President for Infrastructure and Water in Manila. And a microphone will be coming to the front row now.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Michael. Some very interesting perspectives from the panel on the issues as well as the solutions. But if I may just raise 2 points. One on the water, food, energy, climate change nexus that Peter referred to. I think we all understand that water is a very local issue.
Right.
And that we need to get this concept, or this nexus, this relationship, this set of relationships understood at local level so that we make the right planning choices when it comes to allocating water and to using water. How do we do that? I mean, it's not been drilled into local understanding that there is a relationship such as this, and that we need to look at, as Peter just said, about demand and supply side issues, for example, in the planning and budgeting choices that we make. Second, we've been talking about water as a social and an economic good. But my view is that the social aspects of water have really swung far out, if you will characterize it as a pendulum. When can we start thinking about the economic pricing of water? Because if we don't, I actually anticipate problems. I mean, the WRG 2030 report has said that we're going to be 40% short of water, 50% in countries like India. How are the investment costs of closing that gap going to be met if water is not going to be treated as a business? Final observation, Mike, since you spoke about praise for Singapore.
最后呢，因为你讲到了这个新加坡，那么我还想提到我所喜欢的2个城市，一个呢是金边，那么它呢在10年之前呢就已经是有了
of $6 to $9 million every year in a city of 1.5 million, right, with a last tariff increase in 2001. And Manila, my next favorite, which is where I live, where we now have 15% non-revenue water, 24/7 service, and WHO standard water quality. I think I'd like to place that on record, just as a set of examples which we can all learn from.
Those two stories, Phnom Penh and Manila, were absolutely fantastic. There's another question in the front row. I just want to go very, very quickly to Peter, though, on water pricing. Is that part of the solution? When I did my first work on water 25 years ago in California, agricultural water was being sold from the imperial irrigation system at something like $10 a acre foot, and it was actually costing about $400 an acre foot. I mean, the price differential was ridiculous. Is water pricing and market mechanisms for distributing water part of the solution?
I think so. You have to immediately say that you have this emotional issue first, right, which you have to handle. That's a human right. A human right cannot have a commercial price. And this we have to recognize. So for me, the aspect about the 5 liters of minimum per capita plus the 25 liters, let's say about the 30 liters, which has been recognized just recently again as a human right, this can be excluded from the pricing of water. But
after that,
this one is the smallest part. It's about 1.5% of total water usage that we have. So take this apart and find ways. I mean, South Africa has found a way. 6,000 liters of water free. Every liter afterwards you pay. Okay? Fine. That you can handle that one. Let's get this emotional aspect out of the way, because up to now, we constantly move forward. It's a human right, therefore it cannot have a value.
Right, got it.
Okay? So you have to separate this one. That's a human right, 1.5% of water withdrawal. The rest should have a price, needs a price. Otherwise, we will make wrong decisions.
Sure. There's a gentleman in the front row. Microphone right at the front, please. Right here.
Thank you. It's Mohammed Jafar from Kuwait. My question is to Mr. Searle. You made the distinction between a water crisis and a water management crisis. If we know what the issues are you optimistic that this crisis can be solved, that the politicians will find the will and the courage to price water or to face up to the big questions? I have a small question for President Grimson. Have you given any thought to the price that you would charge Saudi Arabia for a tanker of water? Will it be 1 tanker of oil or 2?
Well, I am optimistic, and I'll tell you why I'm optimistic, because it is a resource that's finite. And I use that example with the Red to Dead Sea project. But think of what I just said. If a certain mega city wastes 60% of their water through leakage with no pricing or conservation, I mean, that's just an unsustainable future. So the reason I say it's a management crisis is I think once a finite resource that is squandered and not utilized efficiently, it's not sustainable, so things will be put in place. For example, these megacities will tighten up their systems as in Phnom Penh and other places. Second of all, there will be conservation as there is in a lot of countries in the world, especially in the Middle East. I'm very familiar with the water rates, even in your country. Desalination costs a lot of money. Why don't you reuse it? So that I am very optimistic that management will prevail on a scarce, unmanaged, unpriced, vital resource for human health and welfare.
I'd like to bring back Chief Minister and the Deputy Mayor and ask them whether they see in their state and city increased popular, almost political pressure to manifesting itself in terms of demand for more water, cleaner water, more secure water supply. I mean, are they becoming political question? Is that becoming a political question in Karnataka?
Our government has initiated the process of setting up Water Resources Regulating Authority to ensure improved water resources allocation across competing water users. It also look at water tariff level across various types of water users. It also indicate incentives for efficient water use. The state government has made rainwater harvesting compulsory in Bangalore. They have also brought legislation to regulate groundwater exploitation. And also as a river basin level, they are promoting integrated water resources management principles, IWRM, with the support from the Asian Development Bank. Right now, with the ADB's support, we are preparing a feasibility study, though this we hope to improve water use efficiency level in river basin context also.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Yes. 刚才 Peter 说了一个观点。
Just now, Peter talked about the desalinization and the contradictions in the energy efficiency and usage. And actually, we have a typical example in Tianjin. We have a Beijiang power plant, and they actually desalinize these seawaters, and they contract salt from the seawater. And they also make good use of the waste in this process. And this is a cyclized process. And the final product is the salt chemical product. Actually, this product has already been completed, and it shows a kind of integrated utilization of the water resources. So I agree with Mr. Searle. We need to have an integrated viewpoint about the water resource and water management, and this may help us to save the land resources as well as the water resources. And in Tianjin, we have a single authority to take care of the water resources. We used to have many departments regulating the water management. And also we have fixed the different water pricing systems. For those highly water-consuming industries, we tend to charge them on a higher rate. Thank you.
Can I ask you directly, is this an issue of popular political concern? Do you hear from the people in Tianjin about water? Is this a key quality of life question?
Yeah, this is a key issue for us. So we need a hearing from the people for the pricing, the water pricing.
Right.
Yes, because of different price.
Right.
Copy with different people, different companies.
Interesting. More questions? Yes, two. Lady in the middle there, thank you.
I actually have a question for Chief Minister Yeddyurappa. So it was very assuring to hear from you about your philosophy of Buddha and Gandhi, but my question is, how I would like you to comment on India's national policy of building dams like Farakka and now the plant dam in Tipaimukh, which are going to result like massive droughts in Bangladesh in summer and massive floods in the rainy season. I would like you to comment on this.
Very interesting. I think the President of Iceland wants to comment too, but Chief Minister, you go first.
we are trying our level best to control this all the things, and we are planning to stop these type of things.
Mr. President, you wanted to come in too, because you actually raised the question of the Himalayas yourself earlier, right at the beginning.
No, exactly. I mean, this is concrete proof that the probably most likely cause of military conflict in this part of the world is over water. We have a highly regulated international system in the nuclear power industry. We all know about the debates about that. But there is no agency forcing the countries in the Himalayan region to cooperate on the water resources. So what India does can have a tremendous impact on Bangladesh, but there's no mechanism to deal with it. And to take it further, what the United States and Europe do in terms of CO2 emissions in the next 20 or 30 years will have a tremendous impact on the water systems in India, China, and all of these countries. So the urgency of this is such, and the interdependency is so clear, that as we have comprehensive disarmament agreements, as we worked during the Cold War for missile agreements and so on and so forth, my fundamental view is that we are not going to sufficiently deal with this water crisis on a local or even a national level. We need to work very hard for an effective, regulated, strict, enforceable international regime. And the example with India and Pakistan you just gave, or the trade between Saudi Arabia and Iceland in water, are two good, very good examples of how the world has fundamentally changed.
And Tom, just to kind of pick up a point that you made earlier before when you were talking about the Dead to Red project, you can look at the whole of what used to be called the Levant or the Holy Land, Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, certainly Egypt outside the Nile Valley as one huge problem of aridity and water supply, but almost no transnational mechanism to put it all together, correct?
That's correct, and that's why this project that really made feasible sense took almost 15 years to get everyone to agree on it. And as the president said, he's talking from a much more macro sense about carbon, the Himalayas, conflict, India, Pakistan, China. I mean, so you can take the red to dead on a small scale and scale it up, or you can also scale it down, because I believe that there's a lot of things that people can do instead of waiting for the world to come together on stuff. People are looking at, for example, in Tianjin, looking at the basin integrated approach. I think the mayor said something very interesting. He had 20 organizations dealing with water and came down to one. That's a hugely positive step. That goes a long way to make the problem. It would be like a bunch of countries getting down to one agreement. I mean, that's what you did in the water arena. So there are things that we can do.
But it isn't just transnational cooperation that's needed. It's also a recognition by individual nations that their policies have global impacts. I mean, Bram, you and I were talking very briefly about Brazil just a few minutes ago, a classic example of a nation that has been forced, as it were, to recognize that its national policies on land use have international implications.
Yeah, and they have made huge progress in the last years on agriculture. And there's still a huge amount of opportunities there of crops they can grow very efficiently, very efficient use of water, and yeah, going extremely well. They should be proud of themselves.
Very good. Well, one thing I think we can guarantee, and that the issues that we've discussed this morning in terms of the efficient and effective use of management of water resources, so that, as Peter said, everyone's basic human right to water is guaranteed, the efficient and effective use of increasingly scarce arable land, so that food is, the supply of food is secured for an ever-growing population. I can guarantee that we'll have more sessions on those topics at World Economic Forum meetings and at other places over the next few years. So I'd like you to join me in thanking our our panel for an absolutely terrific morning's worth of discussion of them.